let's go to question number 2, corporate and credit debt analysis updates. How are companies actually responding? What have we noticed in the last 4 or 5 weeks? And what are the companies that are best prepared? Any thoughts?
I think they're struggling to figure out right now exactly what they should be doing, because at this point there's so much uncertainty about when will the economy kind of begin to get back on track. What are all these programs that are the government with the stimulus? What will be available to them? I think they're just trying to figure it out now. I don't think there's a lot of responses per se at this point, because there's not enough information to actually make hard decisions yet, besides just keeping costs down and laying people off.
Now, one thing I have noticed, and as I said, this hit us just out of the blue. Back in December and January, companies weren't really strategically planning for anything like this. If anything, they may have been planning for an impending recession over the next 18 months, but not something that just sort of hit us out of the blue in February and March. One thing I did notice is that across the board, CFOs and treasurers at companies tapped into their revolving credit facilities. And so almost by definition, large corporates have, even small businesses as well, they have bank lines, credit lines, revolving credit commitments from banks, meaning for the large companies, they have syndicated bank loans. And for large companies, they don't tend to borrow under revolving credit commitments. If they want to borrow short term, they tap into, as you had described before, the commercial paper market. And so what I've seen is over the last 4 or 5 weeks, right away, companies start borrowing under their revolving credit commitments right across the board. Mm-hmm. And so I noticed that companies like Macy's, McDonald's, General Motors, they tapped into their revolving credit lines. General Motors announced that it is a $15 billion revolving credit facility, and it's going to borrow under that facility. Macy's and McDonald's have $1 billion facilities, and they're going to tap into that facilities. I also noticed that in the annual report at one of the large banks, JP Morgan, the annual statement from the letter to shareholders from the CEO said that he has noticed already that companies have tapped into their revolving credit line. So that's just sort of that gut response that companies have had and said, we need cash, got to make sure we have cash, got to make sure that banks are going to be in a position to lend us cash. And so we're going to tap into these, what they used to call dry powder facilities.
Right, because I think the revolving credits could actually be
any other
pulled
thing?
from the banks.
That's correct. So you're all right about that. So if we waited, say 5 or 6 months from now, the revolving credit facility could expire. It could be pulled from the bank, and then the company may have a breach of a financial covenant. So these revolving credits usually have financial requirements and financial covenants. And so at March 31st, the company might be in financial compliance to be able to draw under the revolving credit. But by September 1st, they may not be in compliance to be able to draw. So I think in some cases, and I'm going to say wisely, just to make sure that they have the cash, they drew down. And so one by one, I've read that many companies who never use these revolving credit facilities are using them. And then from there, I think, as you had suggested, they're going to try to devise what is an appropriate facility.
Yeah, I think it's still, beside that, I don't think there's much additional planning that can be done now, just too much uncertainty.
Yeah, I think in the back of some of the minds of some of the CFOs and treasurers, that they are going to try to maintain a dialogue with banks, and they may even consider and say, can we restructure? I have something that's due at the end of the year. I have something that's due next year, and so can we just restructure this now? That's not a surety. That's not a certainty. But I think I'm sure CFO offices are trying to say what kind of plan that we should have in terms of funding our operations on a balance sheet over the next 5 to 6 months.
Yeah.